Thank you for coming. My name is Tanguy Doivrin. I'm going to talk to you about mobile versus console game development. So basically what I'm going to say is, first of all, introduce myself, introduce Double6 Studio. Now go over that hot topic, is mobile gaming killing the games industry? Look at different approaches, whether you're on console or on mobile phones. See how to maintain art style across the different platforms. How to see complementarity between the two platforms if you work on both effectively. And finally, take a look at the future of gaming. It's always interesting. So first of all, as an introduction, I started as a trainee artist at Cryo a few years ago now, starting from the bottom. Then worked as a junior artist at Cryo again, and went to Syntex for a bit. This is all in Paris. Then moved to the UK in '97. Worked at Syntex for a brief time, then at Argonaut to be a lead artist on a few projects in North London. Then moved to Cuju in Godalming in Surrey, and until 2007, we were working on. Until then, I was doing box games effectively, and from December 2007 onwards. I'm the art director at Double6, which is specialized in digital distribution, which means we don't do any box projects anymore. It's only PSN, XBLA, Steam, iPhone, iPad. So no physical disc anymore. A few of the games I was involved with. So starting from Argonaut stuff at the bottom, like Catwoman, iNinja, Malice, then Mac on PSP was with Cuju. And the top bit is all Double6 stuff, so Geometry Wars Galaxies on the Wii, and then Top Gun was a PSN exclusive, same as Zombie Burn, and South Park was on Xbox Live Arcade. So a bit of background about Double6. So why was it created? Basically, initially we were Cuju Studio in Godalming in Surrey, which was like a jack of all trades, really doing a bit of everything. So one year we would be doing a first-person shooter, the next game would be a racing game, and the one after that would be a real-time strategy game, and so on and so forth. So we were not specialized in anything, and Cuju was sort of specializing all the studios between Zoe Mode, who did all the casual games in Brighton, to Vatra in the Czech Republic, who do all the kind of Silent Hill and real games. So we had to specialize. That's why we created Double6 on the base of the old Cuju Surrey studio. And what we specialize in is digital distribution. So as I said, it's no more physical support. So I'm going to show you a little trailer, which is not really about any game in particular, but more about the games we've been doing and the games we plan to do in the future. So have a look.
No.
quite varied. As you can see, there's quite a lot of games we were involved with for the last few years. So basically, that's what we are about. We do a lot of kind of different genres of game, but it's all digital distribution, so it's all quite short projects as opposed to doing box projects as in the past, where we would spend like 2-3 years on a project. Now it's more like 6 months to a year on each project. So there's quite a lot we've produced over the years, really. And the initial logo had the "Have Another Go" tagline, which sort of explains what we were about. So it's like a lot of Double6 means like you roll a Double6, you can play a game, and that was the idea of like you wanna pick up and play, you know, whatever you're playing on. You just want to pick up the game, play it again and again, and have another go. And keep enjoying it. So it's like short bursts of gameplay to go with the digital distribution sort of formula, as opposed to kind of long, involving games. So the big question is mobile gaming killing the games industry? So you hear a lot that the price tags are much lower on the iPhone, say, than on console games. So that brings the dev costs down quite a lot. You get a lot of competition from what we call bedroom coders, which means like someone on his own doing a game, submitting it to the App Store from his Mac at home. So a lot of friends of mine and former colleagues, they decided to kind of go off in their own direction and just do their own game. They did their own startup, and you know, they're like a one-man band. They do everything together. If they're a programmer, they get some help from artists. If they're a designer, they learn how to use middleware like Unity and do a game on their own. So you get a lot of that on the iPhone effectively, and as a studio it's kind of tough to compete. Also, Apple's approach is much easier than the strict TRCs and TCRs you get on Microsoft and Sony consoles. So effectively, it's really easy to relatively speaking, to release a game on the Apple App Store. So you get like a flooded market. I mean, comparatively, you get they claim 500,000 games on the iPhone 4S at the moment, whereas on the PS3 there's only like 600 games. So if you compare, there's a much more crowded market on the App Store. So it's more difficult to compete. It's much more competitive in that sense. Even though a lot of them are probably not worthy, but you know, still in the mix you get a lot of competition. So that means for game studios, the development cycles need to adapt. So we need to look at shorter cycles as opposed to, you know, doing like spending a few months on pre-production and then a few months on production and then ramping up the team and ramping down the team. It's going to be like shorter bursts of development. I'll detail later, but basically it just questions the whole structure and organization of the studio. And also we need adequate designs to fit the smaller scope of the game. So instead of doing more involving games with story-driven elements, you will have a lot more action puzzle sort of games where you just pick up the game, play for a bit, when you wait for a reverse, and put it down again and pick it up again later. So it's different sort of designs for those types of games compared with traditional console. So on the defense of the traditional console, you could argue that it's much more tactile, much more accurate sort of input. So you've got the controller, you've got the push button that's very accurate for first-person shooters or fighting games. So you don't get that sensation, you don't get that feedback on an iPhone or on an iPad with a touch screen, really. A lot of hardcore gamers would stick to their console because they want to experience the whole surround sound, you know, the big widescreen, plasma screen, television. They want to enjoy the better graphics, you know, from a better hardware. So I think from that perspective, the console will always be a stronger advantage in that field. whereas the mobile, as I said before, is more casual, more pick up and play. It's got a mass appeal as well. It's not just the hardcore gamers. It's going to be more like my kids, or even my parents could play with an iPhone. Whereas they're not necessarily gamers, but they can enjoy a game on a mobile platform. So as I said before, it's much easier to it's harder to make profit on a mobile because of the smaller prices. So they've got like really small cuts per se. And so the opposite is that on the console, you make profit easier and sooner, effectively, because of that. So you get, you just sell your games for $5 instead of $1, effectively. So obviously you get more royalties out of it. So really, what it means is that you need different approaches. So you need to adapt the scope of the game, as I was saying earlier, in terms of design, in terms of depth, in terms of content. Concentrate on the quality rather than the quantity. So if you have like a game you're going to play when you wait for the bus or something, it's going to be like a 3-minute game experience. So you don't need to have as many levels as Call of Duty on the PS3, where you're going to play it for like 15 hours. So you can basically get the quality bar high enough if you compromise on effectively the quantity, if you don't have as much gameplay out of it as on a console. You can also stylize the artwork to make it more appropriate for the platform. So instead of going for gritty realism, you can get away with a lot more if you do stylized artwork, like a cartoony stuff or even more abstracted art. I will show you later some examples. But basically, it's for us at Double6 anyway, it worked well to do a lot of stylized graphics, so we can get away with more. And the pipelines are different. I mean, you would not necessarily use the same engine on all platforms. I mean, you can use Unreal on the iPhone now, and Unity is quite good as well for both platforms. But really, you've got to be quite pragmatic there and use what works for the platform, and not try to do a unified pipeline for everything, because it's not going to work. So now let's concentrate on console development. I'm going to show you a trailer of the game we made, which was called Burn Zombie Burn, a few years ago. So that will show you the kind of games we made. If that works. Okay. much a top-down sort of score chaser type of game with infinite gameplay. Whereas the next game that we're going to release, hopefully this side of Christmas, has got a bit more depth to it. So as I was saying about the difference between console and mobile, on console you can get a bit more involving gameplay. So what we're trying to do here is add a bit more RPG elements, so you can level up your characters, customize the weapons from the pickups you get. You've got a bit more dialogue and a bit more of a backstory. So hopefully it's a bit more involving and a bit more interesting. So this is the trailer for it.
Peggy 16.
That's the kind of console games you make. So what typical production plan have you got for this? So typically you'll have a few coders at the start, a few artists and maybe one designer for the first 3 months, and it's slowly ramping up over the first 3 months. Then you ramp up to like a team of 10 people for like 5-6 months, and then you're slowly ramping down towards the end. So it's like your typical, maybe it's a bit more for All Zombies Must Die, a bit less for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It depends on the project, obviously, but it's roughly that. As a rule of thumb, we say it's 10 by 10, I mean it's like 10 months, 10 people for 10 months. Typical budget would be $500,000 to $1 million maybe, so it depends really on the project and the specs. And we're looking at 9 months to a year to do a game like that. Maybe Burn Zombie was a bit less, and so All Zombies Must Die will be a bit more. So it's a bit more involving in terms of development time and costs. So the pipeline is a bit heavier, I would say. You start with like concepting characters, concepting levels on paper, or also in Max or Maya. You can start working out the levels. You start doing mock-ups as well, just to do like pre-visualizations. So you would do static renders or little movies of what the game would look like, so that the coders understand what you're trying to achieve, and you can sell it to a publisher if you're not self-publishing. Then the most important phase, the most important thing in the pre-production phase is really to talk to like the other disciplines to find out what's possible. Talk to programmers to know what, from a technical standpoint, what you can achieve, and talk to the designers to know really what is in line with the design, what you should be trying to achieve. So these are like a few concept sketches that we did initially for Burn Zombie Burn, just to get an idea of how characters would interact. A few very quick sketches of the zombies in the game to get different ideas. Because we had quite a lot of zombies on screen, over like 100 zombies at once, we would swap the heads effectively, so you could interchange the bodies and the heads. So you got like 3 different head variants at the bottom, and you just like use the same body, like 3 different bodies and 3 different heads, and just swap them around and swap the textures around for more variety. So that's all happened at the pre-pro stage, really. Again, levels, the same thing again. We just do lots of little sketches to kind of think of the main features. We don't do a concept for the whole level because the layout would change with the design. The weapons, again, very quick sketches. Stylized weapons or made-up weapons, just to get a feel for what the weapons would look like, even though they can always evolve as time goes on. And that's the initial stage. And I was saying earlier, doing mock-ups, so the one thing we did on Zombie Burn is just doing like lots of still images that represent the scale, where the camera would be, where the enemies would be, how many we want on screen, the sort of feel we want for the game. And that's a good starting point to start talking with designers and coders about how we're going to make the game, and then you can start planning. So the production stage is after you've done the pre-pro, you're going to create your low poly models, add diffuse, specular, normal maps, export them in game, test them, and then you edit your level and light your level finally. So the characters, you would use Max or Maya depending on the game pipeline. On Zombie we use Maya a lot because we use the Sony engine, the Fire engine, so that's what they support. Now for All Zombies Must Die, we used the Unreal engine, so we would use Max because Max is probably better suited to make to export stuff into Unreal. But at the end of the day, every artist would use what they're best with, and we can always convert the assets through bluegfx or something like that. So it's not so much of an issue. So we use middleware to build the levels and light the levels. So we would use Unreal or Unity, or sometimes our own engine to export the characters into the game, see what they look like once they lit the levels. So this is like the Bruce character, which is the play character in Burn Zombie Burn. So you can see he's quite detailed compared with the zombie. As I was saying earlier, there's 120 zombies at once on screen, so you need to have them pretty optimized. So this one is only 1,500 triangles. It's quite optimized. Yeah, that Daisy, that's a secondary character. It's quite detailed as well because there's only one of her in the level, so you can go to town on it really. And that's one of the bosses, the Super Zombie. So it's a bit more detailed at almost 4,000 triangles. And that's some renders of what the characters look like, basically for marketing purposes. So once you build the models, you want to generate normal maps, so you could use ZBrush or Mudbox to do the organic models. Also derive the ambient occlusion map from those packages. For environment stuff like vehicles and buildings, you would use the Photoshop NVIDIA filter or Crazy Bump, or even render from Max or Maya to do like the hard edge sort of detail. So this is from ZBrush, some detail of the normal maps we've got on the characters. So you see it's quite involving, it's got quite a lot of detail on console games. Now when it comes to level art, we would use, as I was saying earlier, either Unreal, Unity or any middleware, or otherwise we would use our own technology. So this is for Burn Zombie Burn, we use our own technology, so that's our own level editor. As you can see, it's tile-based. So first we were building all the tiles, like a wall tile, floor tile, corner tile, export that into the game. The designer would put together the collision for the level, place the enemies, test the gameplay, and once they're happy with the layout, the white boxing as we call it, then we would art up the level and just starting placing lights and finalizing the artwork and doing more kind of unique, bespoke pieces. That's another level. That's the graveyard level. You can see 2 stages in tile editor and in game, the final render of the game. Now, we try to kind of keep the same art style for All Zombies Must Die, but the pipeline is totally different because we use Unreal for this game. So all the level design was made in Unreal effectively, so we export everything straight from Max or Maya, and the designers work in Unreal. So who wants to be a millionaire? Again, we use Unreal for the level environments, for the characters as well, and even in the South Park pack, we use Unreal for everything, even though it's all 2D stuff. It's effectively flat polygon with textures of the South Park characters assigned to them, and we make sure the camera always faces the characters, so you don't see it's 2D effectively flat. So Unreal was great for that effectively. Now for Strike Zone Zero, which is another game in production, we use our own engine, so there's no Unreal there. What we've done effectively, we started developing our own technology with South Park, and we carried across in Top Gun. And now we keep refining our tools, and we develop our own technology to do effectively everything in-house with no middleware. So that was for the console side. As you saw, it's quite involving effectively in terms of development times and detail. Now for the mobile games, it's much more simplified, and effectively you've got to think of it as a pick up and play sort of experience. Baberella is a good example of the kind of games we make on iPhone. Right, so that's Baberella on iPhone. So the stages basically are, as I was saying earlier, it's much shorter. You're looking at about 3 months development time for an iPhone game. So the pre-production phase is much looser. It's integrated into the production. You don't do like a long session of like doing sketches and preparatory renders. It's all iterative, really. You start to build some blocky characters and some flat environment, export it, play around, give it to the designers to iterate, and then it goes back to the artist, where you have to basically dress up the levels a bit more, and you keep iterating that way. You don't really separate the pre-production from the production so much, because you don't have the time effectively. So the process is like you do create the low poly models, you add the textures, export, test, debug, and then you edit the levels. And again, you tweak the models, textures, and optimize towards the end. So the typical production is very short. That's the example of Iron Man, which we did on the iPhone a few years ago now. So you'll have like 3 programmers for 4 months, an artist and a half, effectively, for the same duration, and a designer is probably going to be working part-time on this. So the total budget is probably a typical $100,000, maybe on average, a bit more, a bit less, depending on what game you do. The typical three months times 3 effectively, so 3 months for 3 people for 3 months. So the development time is 3 to 4 months effectively. So the different stages, so developing the characters and the levels. First of all, developing the characters. You've got to adapt the art style for the iPhone, bearing in mind that it's not as powerful as PS3 or Xbox. So we're looking at maybe an average of 300 triangles per character on the games we've been making so far. It's just a diffuse shader, it's nothing fancy. I mean, you can do some more involving things, especially on iOS 5, but as we'll see later. But at the moment, it's just very simple, simple shaders and small textures. So this is an example of a zombie game we're developing at the moment. And we're looking at 300 polys for that little zombie guy on the left, and a bit more for the guy on the right, which is like the hero character. And all the detail, all the shading is baked onto the diffuse, and we're looking at 128 by 128 here. Another example, if you were doing a game for the Hulk, level art. So you can use Unity, and we've been using Unity, but this one was just an in-house engine, and the level was effectively composed of floating structures. So effectively, the level design is just one big script, and it just spawns those structures that floats towards you. So you've got thousands of enemies flying towards you, and then these big, massive floating carriers gliding across in an empty sky dome. So it's very simple, effectively. This was like a concept for the zombie game. So it would be just like a flat, very flat surface with lots of zombies, and they're all very optimized, so you can have like lots of them. The Barbarella game, I was showing the trailer for earlier. Again, very flat environment, very simple enemies. We went for like very boxy robot design, so we can have more of them effectively. And Geometry Wars game on the iPhone, I was talking about abstraction earlier. So this is a good example of what we can get away with if you abstract. Then you can have like hundreds and hundreds of shapes there, because it's just geometric shapes. So they take no processing time at all to render. So you can have very frantic gameplay because you can have hundreds of enemies at once. So back to the zombie game. The level art, as you can see, is very simple, very flat, just like one flat plane and a few tombstones and a bit of a background, trees and gates. And the zombies, again, a very simple geometry. So this game would be like a shoot 'em up where you look around in a graveyard and the zombies pop out of tombstones. The level design is very simple. Basically your camera is in the middle and you just look around you. So you see we're looking at like 3,900 polys there, so it's quite low poly. And you see the way it's divided up in the wireframe. Every quadrant is displayed, whether you look at it or not. So if you look at the north quadrant, effectively you're going to hide the other three, and so on and so forth. So this way we can optimize the render and again spawn more zombies and more particle effects. A few examples of the level detail. So we're just looking at 256 or 128 textures, and it's repeating the same quite a lot, and you use vertex color to vary. But initially it's quite simple stuff really. So how do you maintain the art style? That's the tricky thing, is if you are to do an iPhone game in the same style, in the same vein as Burn Zombie Burn or All Zombies Must Die, which are two different platforms, what you need to do is to maintain the art style is to simplify your design. So don't try to transpose what you've got on the PS3 down onto an iPhone, because if you try to port it, it's never going to work, because either it's going to run really slowly or you won't have enough zombies on screen. So it would be quite a poor gameplay experience really. One thing you need to keep in mind is the performance, so just optimize your models accordingly, and keep also the proportions in mind. So if you have an iPhone screen, it's going to be much smaller than your big plasma screen television. So you can alter the proportions accordingly. So you can still maintain the same treatment, like it's cartoony, realistic, super deformed, or gritty, but you have different levels of detail. So if you look at those two images, you understand better, hopefully. So it's the same art style, and it's the same genre, it's the same kind of cartoony feel. But on the PS3, you've got different proportions. So on the PS3, you will see the hands and the feet, and you will see the expression. Whereas on the iPhone, the head will probably be like 10 pixels tall. So you want the head to be bigger, and you want to shrink the body down effectively, give it like a super deformed proportions to get the same feel when they pop out of a tombstone. Another idea as well to convey the same emotion is to change your design depending on what console you're on. So if you're on an iPhone, you will have like blobs for hands and blobs for the feet, whereas on the PS3 you can afford to have more bones, and you can afford to have more geometry in the fingers. So you can have like more facial expressions and more targets for the face. And you still maintain the same art style and same sort of comical feel to your characters, but they are adapted to their platform. So you're not trying to port what's on the PS3 down to the iPhone. You just come up with two parallel designs, if you like, that work together, and you can tell, looking at the iPhone game, that how it relates to the PS3 IP. So my advice, if you develop games on mobile phones, is basically iterate a lot, keep the development times really short, because you don't have much time or budget, so you'll have to try, and it's a lot of trial and error. Effectively, you have to try and export into the game, have a feel for it, and then go back to Max or Maya and optimize, or add more detail where you need, because you don't really know until you're trying the game. Export a lot of placeholders and test them. So don't wait. Don't do like long cycles of doing lots of pre-production, a lot of production, put in the game to find that it doesn't work effectively. So you've got to iterate a lot and do a lot of white boxing effectively. I was saying earlier, I would insist here: do less quantity, do shorter levels, adapted to short bursts of gameplay, as it's a portable mobile device. You won't spend hours on it effectively, so you don't need to build massive levels, streaming levels. You can have like a small room, as long as it looks good and it's fun. That's all you need really. And because it's smaller geometry, you can cram more detail into that smaller environment, because you don't have the rest of the environment to worry about. It's only one room, so. Be very adaptive as well. You have new competing games coming out all the time, as I was saying. There's 500,000 apps on the iPhone. Also, you have new platforms coming out, the new Android phones, always better than the previous ones. So you have to be very quick, effectively, and adapt to whatever comes your way, effectively. And you can't afford to sleep, especially on mobile phones, even more so than on console. So you have to keep your dev times really short. Just bear that in mind all the time, effectively. So if you have to do both, effectively, console and mobile, think about the game genre. I mean, role-playing games are better suited to the console because it's more involving, and spend more time on them. You need to kind of invest a few hours in an RPG to enjoy it. Whereas puzzle action games are more adapted to mobile games. Everyone keeps raving about Angry Birds. I mean, it's a good example, really. So yeah, it's pick up and play on mobile versus more involving experiences on console. That's how you have to look at it, really. And go more stylized on the mobile phone too, so that you can express your creativity better than on the console, where you can afford more detail. And also, in terms of strategy, if you do both games on iPhone and console, you could release like an iPhone game that backs up that advertises for the console game and vice versa. So you do sort of mutual support of the two. Either way, think of the DLCs. It's always better to spread the risk. So rather than spending a lot of time developing a game and find that it's not as successful as you'd hope, you can do like a short game that's going to be cheap, and people will buy it. If they buy it, you can do DLC and then another DLC. So you can release in stages rather than do one big game. And if you're not sure that it's going to be successful, be quite pragmatic, prototype a lot. So I was saying about white boxing effectively. So before doing lots of designs of characters and environments, just make sure what you produce is going to be used in the game, because there's a lot of waste otherwise. So don't commit like a huge team on something that's going to be not really successful or important. So you just have to review your design all the time. So just white box, test out, and then you know for sure what you need to art up. And don't be too dogmatic, be quite pragmatic instead. Experiment, see what works. And even if you have like a game design document that people will say you need a game design document to have everything set in stone at the beginning, I don't think that's true. I think a lot of the time the best ideas come toward the end. So you would, for a long time, Burn Zombie Burn was not particularly fun to play until the last few months when we added more zombie types. And we added like the concept of having waves of enemies coming after you, and all the mini games and all the different game modes where you have like different types of gameplay that made the game really work. So don't be afraid to sort of veer off from your initial design, and just experiment a lot and have fun. So what comes next? It's always difficult to predict what's going to happen. I mean, you can have a good plan for what you're going to be building over the next few years, but then always new things happen in this industry. I mean, currently we're saying that HTML5 will overtake Flash in terms of size, market share. Cloud gaming is going on with OnLive and Gaikai. The Indian and Chinese market will gain momentum because of the cloud gaming. Effectively, you don't need to buy an expensive console, so suddenly you'll have like new gamers that will come over. Whereas currently they're just mainly on PC. Now suddenly they're going to be playing a lot of cloud games, effectively. So it's going to change the picture quite drastically. Future platforms. So Android is catching up big time. PS Vita, 3DS is out, but not as successful as they hope. The Wii U has been announced. Now you have the iPhone 4S with iOS 5. Well, we can expect the iPhone 5, I suppose, in 6 months. They seem to release a new phone every 6 months. The PS4 has been rumored. I mean, it always changes. It's really difficult to predict the future. Look at what Infinity Blade looks like on the iPhone. A few years ago, you wouldn't think that you can have graphics like that on an iPhone, but now it seems to be catching up with the current generation of console. But when you come to think about it, the current console, like the PS3, is 6 years old now. So obviously the next one will be so much better than the iPhone 5, and so on and so forth. So they keep playing catch up, and you keep having new players that you didn't expect. I mean, who could have thought that? Who would have predicted the success of the PlayStation 1 when it came out, when it was a two-horse race between Nintendo and Sega? But yeah, PlayStation was so successful, and the same again when the Xbox came out. It was very much between Nintendo and Sony, and suddenly Microsoft comes here, no experience in the games industry, but now it seems to be the preferred platform. So you just have to be really open-minded at the end of the day. I can't make predictions. I don't think I'm particularly good at it. So I think what we try to do is just be opportunistic and open-minded about what platform you're going to be building your games on. Really, I would advise you to kind of concentrate on making them fun, simple, and short in development time, especially on mobile, and make sure they look pretty, basically. that's it for me. Have you got any questions? Yeah? No? So you were raising your hand. No? Okay. Oh, go on.
The initial concept already been thought through and then created.
Yeah, it's from the initial concept, effectively. So it's quite quick compared with like your traditional game development cycle. I mean, traditionally, before Double6, we were spending 2 years on average on a game. Now on digital distribution, it's much shorter because you're not selling a game for $30, $40. You're selling it for like $5, $10. So you know the budgets are just a fraction. So yeah, effectively, it's quite short development cycles.
So it's just a very defining concept to start with.
Yeah, basically, I mean, probably we always have to reflect back on the previous success. So it's a very good question, actually. And we're in the process of starting to think of the next games we're going to make. That's really difficult. But you've got to listen to the team, and I think the best game you make is the game that the team wants to make, effectively. So you've got to look at the market opportunities, but also what games the team wants to make. So, for instance, when we started Double6, we just had a lot of success with Geometry Wars, and Burn Zombie Burn. If you think about it, it's like a characterized version of Geometry Wars. Really, it's like swarms of enemies that come and attack you. You've got to run away from them. And obviously there's a fire mechanic, you can burn them. But in essence, it's the same principle to begin with. So every new game is like an iteration on the previous game concept with something else added. So All Zombie Must Die is a bit like Burn Zombie Burn, but with like RPG elements. And Strike Suit Zero is a bit like Top Gun in space with like transforming robots. So it's not just jets, it's just like you can be a robot and have different maneuverability. So yeah, I mean, it's quite short and quite iterative, but that's the sort of time frames we've got. All right? Okay, well, feel free to come and have a chat after this. All right, thank you guys.